which encourages domestic demand. With a population of 268 million, Indonesia is the fourth most populous country in the world. Indonesia is the 16th largest economy in the world based on gross domestic product, and the world's 7th largest economy by purchasing power parity measures. This potential is even more promising given the fact that Indonesia is entering a demographic window of opportunity phase. It is estimated that by 2030, Indonesia will experience a demographic dividend in which the composition of the population of productive age in Indonesia will reach 70% of the population. This perspective is even more encouraging. With its strategic location in the Indo-Pacific region, Indonesia continues to encourage international economic cooperation. As the largest economy in ASEAN, Indonesia initiated a free trade agreement between 10 ASEAN member countries and 5 ASEAN partner countries contained in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, signed on 15 November 2020. A very prominent trade and investment partner, Indonesia's natural wealth produces various minerals, including nickel, cobalt, and lithium, which are the main raw materials for batteries for environmentally friendly electric vehicles. Sustainable production and development are also applied with the growing palm oil industry. As the largest producer of palm oil in the world, the Indonesian government encourages the development of sustainable palm plantations by issuing certificates of Indonesia Sustainability Palm Oil for businesses in the sector. Welcoming the Industrial Era 4.0, the Indonesian government has prepared supporting infrastructure through the Palapa Ring project. The 12,128 kilometers worth of fiber optic backbone network project connects all regions in Indonesia. Along with that, Indonesia's digital industry is growing rapidly. Within the last 5 years, Indonesian e-commerce market has grown to 70%. As a digital economic market with the largest and fastest growth in Asia, it is estimated that by 2025, the e-commerce market in Indonesia will reach the value of $53 billion. Indonesian startups attract global investment, many of them achieving the unicorn and even decacorn status. Most of these startup companies also empower the micro, small, and medium enterprises, which contribute significantly to the growing economy of Indonesia. The rapid development of the digital industry also opens up great opportunities in other sectors, especially the creative industry. From game developers to digital applications in music, art, and fashion. Even gastronomy as well as processed food and beverage. At the same time, Indonesia is even more committed than ever to move towards a greener and more sustainable economy. The consistent increase of Indonesia's foreign trade and investment flow has always been supported by the existence of Indonesian representatives abroad. The Indonesia Trade Promotion Center and the Indonesia Investment Promotion Center spread around the globe have always been one of the backbones in the collective efforts. The government of Indonesia's commitment to strengthen economic cooperation with the world remains bold even during the hard times and crisis. The ease of bureaucracy is now followed by legislative reform through the implementation of the Omnibus Law to create certainty in investing in Indonesia from a legal perspective.
By investing here, you're going to get access to the Indonesian market, and you're going to be able to develop an export platform for your products. So a lot of countries are looking at Indonesia now, and I think probably they need to do more than just look. They need to actually come.
Indonesia has a prominent reputation as a country with endless potential. Any sector in Indonesia has the potential to champion growth in the economy. The positive progression made by the government of Indonesia in various sectors, they are ready to contribute more to the economy.
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia and our embassies, as well as representatives in the Americas and Europe, are ready to welcome you for trade and investment to Indonesia. Come over and find the significant opportunities to invest and trade with Indonesia.
When will we allow people in? Over there, I can see. There's 200 people already. I'm counting it.
is a country with extraordinary economic potential. As one of the world's emerging economies, Indonesia has become an important partner for other world economic powers. Indonesia is the 16th largest economy in the world based on gross domestic product and the world's 7th largest economy by purchasing power parity measures. Indonesia continues to encourage international economic cooperation. As the largest economy in ASEAN, Indonesia initiated a free trade agreement between 10 ASEAN member countries and 5 ASEAN partner countries contained in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Along with that, Indonesia's digital industry is growing rapidly. Within the last 5 years, Indonesian e-commerce market has grown to 70%. It is estimated that by 2025, the e-commerce market in Indonesia will reach the value of $53 billion. At the same time, Indonesia is even more committed than ever to move towards a greener and more sustainable economy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. A very good morning to all the participants from North America.
A good afternoon to those from Europe and the Middle East. And a great evening to those in Asia. On behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, welcome to this webinar event, Indonesia is open for business. I am delighted to note that we have had over 800 registrations from 30 countries for this event. That's a fabulous turnout, and we'll do our best to make this worth your while. I know this is early morning for those on the West Coast, so we will need to wake you up. And for those in Australia, it's already midnight, so we'll need to ensure that you stay awake. For all of you already sleepy, and if you have the habit of snoring, can you please keep your microphones on mute to avoid embarrassment to all? Thank you. My name is Sumit Datta, and I work with Indonesia Business Partners, a market entry firm which helps international companies enter and grow in the Indonesian market. We are very proud and privileged to support the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in hosting this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you are familiar with Indonesia. Some of you might know it is the 4th largest country in the world with 280 million people, only marginally less than the USA, which is number 3 with 330. Others might know Indonesia to be a massive country spread over 17,000 islands, with East and West Indonesia further apart than the distance between San Francisco and New York City. And others might be more familiar with Indonesia because of the mystical island of Bali, the kingdom of the gods, the world's favorite holiday destination. But Indonesia has another identity, albeit one which is not so well known. Indonesia is arguably the most promising investment destination for internationally minded companies in the world today. Just a couple of facts, not opinions, not views, just facts to substantiate this case. Firstly, Indonesia is the largest economy in ASEAN and the 16th largest in the world. It is part of the elite 1 trillion GDP club. The economy has been growing at 5% for the last decade. Size matters. Indonesia is just too big to ignore. Secondly, Indonesia represents a vast consumer market with 280 million people, of which 60% are below the age of 35. Think of the opportunities. Thirdly, Indonesia's macroeconomics are amongst the best in the world. Inflation below 3%, interest rates in single digits. The rupiah has been stable vis-a-vis the US dollar for the last couple of years. And Indonesia's debt to GDP ratio is amongst the most fiscally conservative in the world. And finally, and very importantly, Indonesia is a young but a very successful democracy. It enjoys political stability, it enjoys social stability, it enjoys religious harmony. And all these three are really important factors for investors looking for a sustainable country to invest in for the long term. So for those of you already present in Indonesia, what do you need to invest even more? And for those who are not yet here, what is taking you so long? Admittedly, Not everything is perfect in Indonesia. Licenses take long, bureaucracy and red tape can cause frustration, land acquisition can be difficult, regulations can be complex, and it can take ages to get things done, like in most emerging markets. And the times are changing and the new Indonesia is unfolding. To evidence this, we have today 3 senior members of President Joko Widodo's government to speak to you personally. And then we have a panel of experts who will talk about the opportunities and challenges they see in the new Indonesia. To kick things off, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Bu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Indonesia's illustrious finance minister. Bu Sri Mulyani has a long relationship with the US. She attended the University of Illinois for a master's degree, and she also completed her PhD in economics. Bu Sri Mulyani has also worked in the USA, first as executive director of the IMF, representing Southeast Asia, and then as managing director of the World Bank. During both stints, she was recalled back to Indonesia, first by President SB Yudhoyono, and then later by current President Joko Widodo to become the finance minister of Indonesia. Bu Sri is currently serving her 3rd term as finance minister, and we all hope that she does not stop at 3. Bu Sri, may I please request you to make the keynote address. Terima kasih, Bu.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good evening to all of you from Jakarta. First of all, I would like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for hosting this important event and inviting me to speak tonight. I would like to also convey our appreciation to all participants, as well as investors, business representatives all over the world for attending this event. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now entering the last months of the 2nd quarter of 2021. Around the world, all countries are still struggling to deal with the COVID-19. The downturns of the economy globally is severe, and it is comparable to what is happening in the global depression. We are all now also trying to recover the economy while at the same time also focusing in dealing with the COVID-19. Currently, some part of the world still struggling with lockdown and also in terms of managing the spreading of the COVID-19. The lockdown as well as the effort to prevent the spreading of COVID will eventually impacting the social and economic activity. Indonesia has been quite fortunate that since 2021, we are able to manage and control the COVID-19. We are hopeful that we are going to continue have this health discipline and practices, which is adopted by all the population, including the most important local government, so that we are continue able to control the spreading of the COVID-19 while at the same time recovering the economy. Indonesia also has been fortunate to secure more than 400 million doses of vaccine, and this will be sufficient to inoculate around 181.5 million targeted people. We do hope that the vaccination program and the continued health protocol adopted by the people will be able to manage this COVID-19 threat, while at the same time our focus to recover the economy will be continued. Indonesia economy is showing the recovery, although in this case is still in a very gradual pace, but we expect on the 2nd quarter of 2021, the acceleration of the recovery is going to happen. The 1st quarter in 2021, economic growth is still at the negative territory, but almost near to the 0%. That is the minus 0.74. We will continue accelerate the economic recovery through many of our policy instruments. Strong recovery has been indicated through various indicators. Consumer confidence index has reached above 100, which is pre-COVID level is being surpassed. Retail sales index also continue increase very strongly. PMI manufacturing index is now the highest in the last 7 months and continue to expand, showing that the new order as well as the output of the manufacturing is continue to expand. We also see the export continue growth even in April 2021, growing by more than 50%. And this is accompanied also by the import, especially for raw material and capital goods. Indonesia economic growth this year is expected in the range of 4.5% to 5.3%. This is a recovery that is going to be supported by the government policy, especially the fiscal policy. With the strong vaccination and strong discipline at the health protocol, we are hopefully can continue strengthening the momentum of recovery. Let me now explain how the government fiscal policy, which is playing a strategic role in recovery of the economy. As we all know, that COVID-19 is affecting not only people health or the society, but also disrupting or affecting very significantly economic activity. The fact that people cannot mobile or make the activity outside the house has severe impact to the employment as well as business activity. Fiscal policy and fiscal instrument play a very important role in countering this downside risk from COVID-19. Using our budget, especially on the spending side, we design what we call it handling of the COVID-19 and economic recovery program. The economic recovery program consists of support for households, especially the most vulnerable one, and also support for the small medium enterprises using our spending as well as the tax incentive, tax relief, and also support from the credit relaxation guarantees that hopefully will restore the economic activity. With the consequence of the economic downturn coming from the COVID, our revenue collection is also contracted in 2020, while the spending increased significantly. That's why through our emergency law, which is approved by the parliament, the government were able to expand the deficit of our budget to 6.1% of GDP last year. This is extremely different from what the Indonesia traditionally practices in the past 20 years, in which fiscal deficit should not exceed 3% of our GDP. But this is an extraordinary time, extraordinary challenge, and extraordinary task. That's why we are also adopting an extraordinary policy. Even with this widening fiscal deficit, our debt to GDP ratio is still relatively modest comparing to many countries, both in the United States, European, Japan, or other countries. The debt to GDP ratio with this increasing deficit reached the level of 39.4%. Indonesia continue managing our fiscal policy, the most important tools in dealing with this COVID, as well as recovering the economy in a very careful and prudent way. That's why the credit rating agency maintained stable outlook rating for Indonesia. This is especially coming from Fitch, Moody's, Japan Credit Rating Agency, and Rating and Investment Agency. In 2020, we were able to use this fiscal tool combined with our monetary authority policy to prevent the economic growth to contract very deeply. The contraction of our economy has been around 2%, relatively modest to the other economic contraction. But the challenge ahead in 2021 and the future is how to recover faster, stronger, and sustainable way. And that's why the Indonesian government not only focusing in dealing with the COVID or doing the counter-cyclical through our macroeconomic tools like fiscal policy and monetary policy. Indonesia government, even during this very critical and health crisis time, we are focusing in reforming our foundation and fundamentals of the economy, especially to improve investment climate so that Indonesia is going to be more productive and competitive. The government during this very critical time was able to pass the law number 11/2020, a job creation law. With this law, we are totally reforming our investment regime. This omnibus law on job creation is try to improve the investment climate fundamentally by reducing the regulation, the hassle on the bureaucracy, reducing the processing time for licensings, enabling for the investment procedure in a more transparent, accountable, and certain way. And with that, we want to reduce the high cost economy. We are prioritizing to create the regulatory framework and investment policy which is transparent, fast, certain, and convenient, so that business community, both from abroad as well as domestic business community, will find doing business in Indonesia is easy and clear. That will definitely helping not only big business, but even small, medium enterprises to be able to unleash their potential and work conveniently and easily within the investment climate that the Indonesian government are now improving. We've already implemented this law through all regulatory framework at the government regulation, ministerial level or decree, as well as local government. The administrative procedure, for example, for investment will be accelerated. There will be licensing certainty. There will be also ease of access. There will be efficiency and transparency in the whole process using the IT and digital technology. With that, we will be able to invite the business domestically as well as abroad to do business in Indonesia. Will be no investment small enough because all investment are important for Indonesia. We also, in this case, has launched new investment priority list. This is the presidential regulation number 10/2021. What is different of this regulation comparing to the investment policy before? Previously, Indonesian government closed 20 sector which is listed in the negative list investment. Currently, with the new omnibus law, the government eliminated the number of closed sector into only 6 remaining sector. Even the 6 remaining sector is actually the sector which is agreed or approved or in line with the international practices. So the other 14 sectors which previously closed are now open. Several new sectors which is now open, including vital sectors such as transportation, energy, construction, telecommunication, and information technology or IT. These are all very critical, strategic, and important infrastructure that will enable Indonesia to continue build while at the same time also facilitating all investors to jointly working in Indonesia with a better investment climate. Investor which is investing in the priority industry also can enjoy and receive incentive in the form of tax holiday, tax allowance, as well as the exemption from import duty. The industries, especially manufacturing industry for strategic and priority sector, will receive strong support from the government in the form of non-fiscal incentive. For example, priority on attaining business license, work permits, and supporting infrastructure, including energy supply and raw material guarantee. There are specific criteria for business enterprise that can be classified as a priority sector. For example, these strategic sectors included those who work related to national strategic project, capital intensive project, or the project which have research and development or innovation element. We also support export oriented and use advanced technology as a priority sector that will be developed in Indonesia. We also open new investment priority lists, including those areas which create high value added activity. Our focus in this case is to create an investment climate which is friendly, easier, transparent, so that the productive investment can be conducted in Indonesia. With that, we do hope that we are going to be able to transform the Indonesia economy, which is aligned well and supporting with our vision to create Indonesia maju in 2045. With the Omnibus Law on job creation and all reform, we are continue to also diversify our financing side. The Omnibus Law on job creation created Indonesia Sovereign Wealth Fund, or we call it Indonesia Investment Authority, INA. With this INA, we are opening a new opportunity for our partner investment fund to invest in Indonesia in an equity form. We take the opportunity and the risk together, and they enjoy a lot of government support. INA, as a new entity, which is sui generis, specifically designed, have a global strong legal basis that create legal certainty. The governance of INA is being designed in a way that can create confidence with the transparency, recruitment of the professional, board of director and supervisory, and also in creating a good governance according to Santiago principle. There is also flexibility and ability to adopt international investment best practices. We also will use this INA in order for us to be able to transform the state-owned enterprises and strategic projects so that they are going to be healthy with a positive high return and efficiency as well as excellent delivery. I'm happy to inform you that with this establishment, INA was able to mobilize funding with our own funding, 750 million US dollar. We were able to attract 3 billion foreign investors to invest in the infrastructure, toll road platform. INA also has signed MOU with our BPJS Ketenagakerjaan, that is our labor insurance, in which the latter has already committed to invest around 25 trillion or 1.7 billion within INA. This is just an early start of our sovereign wealth fund, which hopefully will be able to provide alternative investment that will invest to Indonesia, including a different risk appetite. Ladies and gentlemen, with all this effort which the government is doing, we will use also our fiscal policy, not only addressing the issue of COVID and recovering the economy, but we will also investing on a human capital, reforming bureaucracy, and continue building infrastructure in a sustainable way. We will use our investment instrument like fiscal policy in order for us to be able to create the right investment climate. Using the fiscal policy in order for us to be able to also provide the right signal for where the investment is going to be placed, because it is reflecting a huge potential of the Indonesia economy. The economy with the size more than 1 trillion, with the big domestic market, and huge potential in terms of natural resources, as well as the reform by the government that will create the right incentive for the investors. Indonesia also participating and concerned about climate change. So since 2016, on the fiscal side, we implement climate change budget tagging. This is also combined with our incentive to provide more low carbon growth, especially on the energy sector, as well as other sector. We are currently also spending our climate related budget, which is around 6.2 billion per year, or around 4.1% of our state budget. Of course, this is not going to be adequate. We need more investment that will also invest in the area that will also contribute to the achievement of the climate change program, preventing the world to increase the temperature, avoiding the catastrophic implication of that. And that's why we are going to use our instrument, both fiscal and non-fiscal, to attract more investors who's committing also in this climate change program. We use our instrument, for example, like bonds, green bond, as well as using our instrument like spending and incentivize local government in order for us to be able to continue attract more investors in the area of renewable energy, mass transportation, and the area which is important for our climate change program. So Indonesia is open for business, and the government committed very strongly to improve the investment climate. And we, while also addressing the issue of the COVID-19, we will continue to make sure that Indonesia will work with all our stakeholders to establish a good and sound investment climate. I do hope you are all is going to join us to see and also to invest in Indonesia, a place and a country in which we welcome good investment with a good sound principle to invest in Indonesia. Investing in Indonesia is good for the country and is good for the investors. Thank you to all of you who's listening and attending this forum. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Many thanks, Busri, for your clear vision and direction on what the government is doing to grow the economy post-COVID and how the omnibus law can assist investors across different industries. I would now like to welcome our second keynote speaker, Bapa Mahendra Siregar, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs. Bapa Mahendra has been in several important government roles for the last 25 years, including being the Indonesian ambassador to the US, the chairman of Indonesia's Investment Coordinating Board, BKPM, the Vice Minister of Finance, Vice Minister of Trade, and the Deputy Coordinating Minister for Economic Affairs. However, President Joko Widodo clearly felt that Pa Mahendra was not busy enough. So last month, the president added to his responsibilities, putting Pa Mahendra in charge of the mammoth and very important project of implementing the omnibus law. Please welcome the ever youthful and dapper Bapa Mahendra to the stage. Pa Mahendra, silakan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sumit, for the kind introduction. Excellency Finance Minister Sri Mulyani, my dear colleagues of ASEAN business partners, dear panelists, all participants to this very important webinar, Indonesia is open for business. This is really a great opportunity to update you on what we have done and we have achieved, and also the outstanding challenges that we are addressing together with all stakeholders. On that note, let me update you on two issues. First, on the pandemic situation, and the second, on the investment progress. On the pandemic situation, let me update you on how our efforts in mitigating the health risk of the pandemic to our population. Up to date, I could report to you that the number of daily new infected people are stabilizing and relatively at lower end compared to the whole 12 months, while recovery rate increasing and rate of fatalities goes down significantly. We had been able to restrict a very difficult situation of people not going back to their hometown at the end of the Ramadan month and the Eid al-Fitr celebration just 2 weeks ago. And today, the government has decided that Indonesia will not have its Hajj pilgrimage travelers to Saudi this year. Of course, these are very tough and unpopular decisions, but it also means that the government prioritizing the health and safety of the people. On the vaccine development, I would like to report to you, as the Minister of Finance indicated, we have secured 400 million dosage of vaccines contracted to several producers around the world, out of which 100 million dosages have arrived or on the way its shipment to Indonesia. The 100 million dosages that we have used and in the process of being distributed are produced by 3 vaccine producers that already have the emergency use listing issued by the WHO. And in the medium term, we are going to produce as part of the global value chain of the vaccine to deal with the COVID-19 virus, including one of the process together between Biopharma and Baylor School of Medicine in the US that is now already on the list of vaccine of the WHO that is going through clinical tests and application of the EUL of the organization. Up to now, 45% of the critical group of people out of 40 million altogether consists of health workers, the elderly, and what we call the frontline workers, who are the retailers, the merchants, the manufacturing workers, civil servants, and other public workers have received their vaccination. Now, on the investment front, let me update you that despite last year pandemic situation, Indonesia has achieved its target to gain 57 billion US dollars direct investment from overseas as well as domestic companies. And the latest update, the first quarter of 2021, we have witnessed the realization of direct investment to Indonesia has reached 15 billion US dollars, which is 24% of the whole year target, which shows an increase of 5% compared to the same period last year. On this front, it is important to reiterate what also have been mentioned by the finance minister. While many countries, also like us, are focusing on addressing the pandemic, Indonesia is also addressing and continuing its economic reform, among others, by issuing the historical omnibus law on job creation. In addition to overall improving the investment climate, we also want to ensure that Indonesia's ease of doing business performance will improve. And we have noted there are 5 factors which makes Indonesia's ease of doing business rating is still relatively only at the mid-level compared to other countries. Those are the lengthy time to have the civil court process. The setting up business is still considered taking too much time, as well as the issue on property registration, getting permits for construction, and the transparency and governance of international trade-related regulations. Now, Because of that, we have issued the job creation omnibus law that would improve the overall investment climate. I will not get into the detail, maybe during the question and answers, but at the same time, we have heard earlier the finance minister talking about that. But I would like to add as my last point that to show the government's strong commitment and seriousness on this matter, the president has issued and established two task forces. The first task force is basically to ensure that those who have applied for investment process will be served and facilitated accordingly. This task force is chaired directly by the Minister of Investment and have two vice chair who are the Deputy Attorney General and the Deputy Chief of Police to ensure that all the investment plan would be implemented accordingly. The second task force is the so-called socialization task force of the Omnibus Law. And coincidentally, I chair it myself together with the Vice Minister of Finance, the former Minister of Finance, Khatib Basri, and the Executive Secretary of the Economic Recovery Team, Raden Pardede, which, like the first task force, directly report to the President only. And this task force responsibility is to assess, evaluate the implementation of all the regulations related to the Omnibus Law of Job Creation that ensure that the implementation would be in line with the objectives of the law itself. And we will have the evaluation, assessment, and report back to the President so that the President would understand the development, the progress, and the lack of which that would necessarily need actions to be carried out accordingly. Let me stop there, and I thank you again for your participation and keen interest to invest in Indonesia. Thank you.
Terima kasih, Pak Mahendra. Thank you so much for your forthright and candid comments, as usual. Pak Mahendra, if I can request you to stay on for another 5 minutes. We have some questions which investors want to ask of the government. And since you are the one standing here, if you would attempt to sort of answer them on behalf of the government. So if I may begin with the first question, Pa. So the first question relates to foreign ownership. When an international company wants to invest in a country, one of the most important factors they consider is the amount of control and influence they can have in managing the investments in that country. In our interactions with international investors, one of the common questions we often asked is, how has the Omnibus Law changed regulations regarding foreign ownership? Can you please share your insights, Pa Mahendra?
Thank you, Sumit. I understand the rationale of this question because in the past, the approach to this matter is from what sectors were close to foreign investors. And that, in a way, represented a rationale or a mindset behind such an approach. But now, the new investment decree with regard to sectors that are open focus more on which industries and sectors that we prioritize, while except the 6 sectors that again mentioned by the finance minister earlier, which are closed, basically are all open. But we want to focus also on the priority sectors that again mentioned by the minister, among others, sectors that relate to strategic projects, that second, sectors that provide capital and labor intensive, sector that has high tech capabilities, sectors that include the criteria of a pioneer industry, sectors that focus on exports and provide increased capacity of import-related substitution, and sectors that promote and utilize research and development and innovation. Now, for these sectors, the government provides incentives, as again indicated by the finance minister, and these are all processed in one-stop service based on risk assessment of the BKPM. The one-stop service based on risk assessment was introduced and now under the trial period since a couple of days ago, and we will rolling out to invite investors and possibly also other stakeholders to look at the facilities so that we could improve it. This is again another approach that we don't feel or we don't pretend that our solution would be one and for all and would stop there, but we will continue our reform, and we really invite investors and stakeholders to look at what we have achieved and what we have not achieved as remaining challenge, and provide us with feedback, inputs, and suggestions. And as I suggested, I am reported straight to the president on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pa Mahindra. If I may, one last question. Our second question relates to telecom and digital infrastructure. A very interesting question from Dr. Alper Turken, the Asia Pacific and Middle East head of Comscope, which is a US telecom major operating in Indonesia, who alludes to the fact that Indonesia is the home to 1 decacorn and 4 unicorns, and believes there's huge potential in the digital and technology space. So his question is, how is the Indonesian government planning to expedite broadband development and increase connectivity across Indonesia? An important milestone in this journey will be the Kalimantan New Capital Project. How is the government looking to efficiently build state-of-the-art connectivity in the new capital of the country? Over to you, Pa Mahindra.
Thank you. Well, it is obvious that Indonesia wants and needs to develop the new economy because of the structure of the population and also the nature of our geography. And on that, the government last year actually has completed the whole Palapa Ring internet services, which consists of 36,000 fiber optic cable that runs through the land and submarine cable all over Indonesia, which basically cover from our west to east part of the country. Now, of course, the issue or the second challenge is how to connect the last mile, because the fiber optic cable basically functions as a transmission cable. Now we want to ensure that distribution is also there. Now, this is where, again, we are opening up for investment, both for international and domestic, both for the infrastructure and the content and the utilities of this exciting new economy, infrastructure, and content and innovation. Now, with regard to continuing investment, the government every year at least allocates $2 billion to update and upgrade this internet and digital infrastructure. And that is excluded the other infrastructure related to conventional telecommunication. Now, we hope that will provide the opportunity for the last mile challenges the establishment or the construction of 12,000 base transceiver stations or BTS that will again connect all the public services all over Indonesia through internet services, as well as all major cities and second layer cities. Now, that includes all the health community facilities, all public schools, all basically trading and market facilities all over Indonesia. But again, that is the responsibility and the obligation of government to provide to access equally to all people. But what we need also to do is to bring in the investment, the business, the commercial elements to complete the whole picture. And we hope we can see you in this very exciting opportunity as well. Thank you.
Mahendra, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your candid comments. Terima kasih, Bapak. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we now move on to the next phase, which is we want to show you a short video. Given the trade tensions between the USA and China and the impact of COVID globally, many corporate customers are evaluating their concentration risk and the dependence on any one country for their factories or for their production. Some customers who have their factories in China are looking for alternatives. And of course, Indonesia presents a very viable option. We now have a video of Bapak Danny Soferian, CEO of Alpen Lighting Products, who recently moved his factory from China to Indonesia, who explains his rationale and his experiences in this process. Can we please have the video, please?
My name is Daniel Suferan. I'm President CEO of Alpen Lighting Products. We are a manufacturer of solar lighting as well as other types of LED-related products. Our markets are mainly the United States, but we also manufacture and ship to other countries such as Mexico, Canada, Korea, and others. Well, one of the main reasons, of course, is the ease of hiring labor. More and more, we've had difficulty with labor and expanding our labor force in China. And we soon realized that Indonesia can be a solution to that problem, to find experienced as well as the typical workforce that we need for the production of our products. So it's interesting that our research began actually in setting up a plant in Jakarta. Soon after, we were doing some preliminary thought processes about Jakarta. We realized that Central Java, specifically Semarang, may be a better place for us. We did research and realized that the government is very supportive of foreign businesses that come into Central Java, and they have actually spoken about this region being the hub for much of the foreign investors. Obviously, we could find property at less expensive prices than we would in Jakarta, and we felt that this was a great new beginning for us to start in Semarang. The Consulate General of Indonesia in Los Angeles has been absolutely incredible in trying, in giving us the tools for us to be able to establish in Central Java. They have not only assisted us anytime that a roadblock comes up and a problem exists, but they have gone as far as sending their staff with us into Central Java so that they can allow us to meet with all of the specific officials that will have to eventually deal with our business practices. In specifically, Mr. Saud and his team have been amazing in helping us to achieve our goals. We owe a debt of gratitude to them as they have helped myself and my team in our efforts in Central Java. I would like to let everyone know that if they are considering Indonesia as a prospective investment for either real estate or relocation of their plants, that truly you will encounter a very welcoming culture. You will see that the people are extremely willing to partner with you and to work with you in order to achieve your goals. My suggestion to those who are considering it is to research further and to allow the offices or the minister's offices to help you in achieving that goal.
Thanks for your comments, Danny. And I'm sure that in recognition of their good work, the Consulate General of LA gets to take the Sunday off. Before we move to the panel discussion, can I please request everyone's assistance? We have a very small feedback review. It will take you just 30 seconds of your time. And we would welcome your opinion on this webinar so that we can improve. There's a small button called polling at the bottom of your screen. Can you please click on that and provide your feedback anytime from now to when you leave this webinar? Thank you very much. We now move on to one of the key items on our agenda, which is the panel discussion. I'm just trying to close this panel. Give me a second. Yeah. So we now move on to one of the key items on our agenda, the panel discussion, which will be moderated by my good friend, Vikram Nehru. Vikram has a title which is almost as intimidating as his achievements. He is the Distinguished Practitioner in Residence at Johns Hopkins University. And before that, he was the Chair of South Asian Studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Prior to that, Vikram was in the World Bank in several senior management positions for over 3 decades. He's also an advisory board member of Indonesia Business Partners and currently based in Washington, DC. Please welcome the distinguished and erudite Vikram Nehru to the stage. Vikram, I leave this panel discussion in your capable hands, and don't let the panel members leave until they've shared all their secrets with our participants. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sumit. And may I also extend my warm welcome to all those who have beamed in to this seminar from around the world. So we just heard from 2 prominent Indonesian ministers about the government's view of the economic reforms that they've introduced. And we've just heard about the experience of one company that relocated from China to Indonesia. So I'm now delighted to introduce our star-studded panel to discuss the perceptions of the foreign business community on how they view the changing prospects of investing in Indonesia. So our panel consists of Mr. Alexander Feldman, Chairman and CEO of the US ASEAN Business Council, Ms. Sarah Wilshaw, Chief Trade Commissioner of the Government of Canada, Mr. Mike Willowan, Chairman and CEO of the Nongsa Digital Park and CEO of Infinite Studios, and Mr. Dakri Purchase, CEO of UPC Renewables Indonesia. So we have about 40 minutes for this panel discussion. And while I will start by asking the panel members my own questions, I hope to include questions from our audience. So I would invite you to send your questions through Zoom's Q&A function. Without further ado, let me start with you, Mr. Feldman. You've just heard both ministers actually talk about the job creation omnibus law, as well as the substantial reforms in the negative list for the FDI, shrinking the negative list for the FDI. From your vantage point as chairman of the US-ASEAN Business Council, how has American business perceived these policy developments? And what else are they looking for to help American investors invest in Indonesia? Over to you.
Thank you, Vikram. It's always great to be on a panel with you chairing and moderating it. And I want to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for putting this together and including me on this illustrious panel. I also want to thank Indonesia Business Partners and Summit Duta for organizing today's event. Your question is a great one and obviously timely given what we've just heard from Minister Sri Mulyani and Vice Minister Mahendra Siregar. Both great friends of the US-ASEAN Business Council and myself as well. You know, Indonesia is ASEAN's largest market and largest economy. So for American business, it has always been important and always been of interest. But Vikram, the Omnibus Law on Job Creation and its implementing regulations are game changers. And it sends a clear signal that Indonesia now means business. It addresses the perennial challenges that we've faced in Indonesia of overregulation and complicated regulations, as well as burdensome licensing and lack of national local coordination and high taxes, and takes those challenges and helps to simplify regulations, as we've heard from both ministers, and simplify licensing for a one-stop shop at the brand new Ministry of Investment that replaces the BKPM that we've heard about today, the Indonesia Investment Coordinating Board. It clarifies and streamlines local national coordination on permits, licensing, and registration. It addresses the complicated licensing and registration requirements that previously existed. And it also reduces corporate income tax, which is something I'm surprised I didn't hear the Minister of Finance talk about, because that's, from a business perspective, one of the big incentives that everyone gets, reduces it to 22% this year and 20% next year. That's huge. You know, it's incredible that in December of 2019, I took a group of our members into the palace in Jakarta to meet with President Jokowi, and we had an opportunity to hear firsthand his vision for Indonesia going forward and how he hoped to ease the use of business and create a seamless Indonesia for business. And just 1 year later, that vision has been implemented. So it's pretty incredible. But of course, there's more to be done. And Vice Minister Mahendra Siregar touched on it. The key to all of this going forward and what we're looking at very carefully is the implementation of this law and its regulations, and how it actually works in clarity, transparency, and efficiency between the national government, provincial governments, and local governments. We also are looking at hopefully a increase in Indonesia's trade relationships with the rest of the world, opening up market access for goods produced in Indonesia. We're encouraged by Indonesia's signature on the RCEP, or Regional Economic Cooperation Agreement, that links ASEAN and its +6 partners. But we think there's more to do. We hope that Indonesia will look at CPTPP, and we'll look at an agreement with Europe to try and open up even more markets. And that will be critical to Indonesia's competitiveness vis-a-vis other players in ASEAN. I'll stop there, but thank you so much for that great question. You're on mute.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Let me turn to you, Ms. Wilshaw. You know, as Chief Trade Commissioner for the Government of Canada, You manage over 1,400 experts in 160 offices worldwide, which is a huge, huge group. So what is your assessment and your staff's assessment of Indonesia as a preferred investment destination compared to other emerging markets? And how would you add to Mr. Feldman's thoughts on the changes that are taking place, both in terms of the investment environment within Indonesia, but also the trade policies that he mentioned? Over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Vikram, and good evening, everyone. Bonsoir, salamat sore. Greetings to Minister Sri Mulyani and Vice Minister Siregar. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and a big thank you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia for organizing this, and to Sumit for hosting as well. It's just terrific. You asked about our team. We have a fantastic team on the ground in Jakarta, very knowledgeable, very well connected, locally engaged staff, led by Ambassador Cam McKay, who is himself a very experienced trade expert. And they've made it clear to us here in Ottawa that Indonesia has really become a strategic partner for Canada. It's now Canada's third largest partner in the region, the second most important destination for Canadian direct investment. Investors have been there for a long time. Canadian investors have leading Canadian companies in financial services, hotel, retail, infrastructure, already invested around 4 billion Canadian dollars into the market. So that's not insignificant. And Canadian multinationals employ around 10,000 people through their affiliates in Indonesia as well. So it is important. But we've also seen that, historically some companies have held back, right? Concerned about some of the bureaucracy and the challenges. It's a very different operating environment from the North American context that perhaps we're used to. And so, people were a little concerned. But I think that's why, speaking to Alex's point and to what we heard from the minister and the vice minister, we're really excited actually about these changes. I think that they've, we heard the minister talk about steps being taken, other things that they're looking at to really strengthen the environment. And I think, primarily we would encourage Indonesia to continue those reform efforts. But your question is around what would support more Canadian investment. And there I go back to what Alex said as well about FTAs. So he and I would echo simply some of those points. He left out Canada, so I will add it. That is my job. Then I think that a comprehensive economic partnership with Canada and Indonesia would be a great next step. It would certainly facilitate increased bilateral investment. It would underpin our interest in the manufacturing sector, as you mentioned. It would certainly help both economies to rebuild in the wake of the pandemic and looking at our economic recovery. When we talk about manufacturers, what they really want to know is that they are going to have secure and unfettered access across global supply chains. They want world-class, cost-competitive inputs, and this is what they're looking for. But they also need greater certainty, and they need protection for their investments. And certainly a trade and investment agreement would open up a lot of new markets for our exporters. It would create opportunities for our businesses across a pretty broad range of sectors, and thinking of some of the things that, that are already happening, but we could do more in agriculture, agri-food, infrastructure, clean tech, digital trade, which, the minister and vice minister spoke about, energy, financial services. There's a lot there. So really a comprehensive, ambitious deal would create a lot of opportunities, not just for Canadian companies, but also for Indonesian companies in other global markets. Thinking about, and Alex mentioned CPTPP, which, Canada is a member. Canada is also the only G7 country that has comprehensive free trade agreements with every other G7 member. So actually, Indonesian companies could take advantage of a platform in Canada to access North American markets and European markets. So just saying, there are perhaps a lot of advantages on both sides, and our negotiators are ready to go. So we're looking forward to the conversation on that. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. That was a good plug for Canada, I must say. Let's now turn to Mr. Wiluan. Vinod, Mike, before I ask you a question, I must mention that you are the CEO of Infinite Studios and were a co-producer of Crazy Rich Asians. I absolutely love that film, so congratulations for that. You're also the CEO of Nongsa Digital Park in Batam Island, a digital park that appears well positioned to capture the synergies between Singapore and Indonesia, as well as the explosive growth in digital commerce that the ministers have referred to and just now Ms. Wilshaw referred to. So can you give us some insights on what made you choose Batam as the location for Nongsa Digital Park, and what advice would you have for potential foreign investors considering Indonesia as a destination for high-tech investments?
Well, thank you, Vikram, for that introduction, that very eloquent introduction, as well as thank you, Ministers Ibu Sri Mulyani, Bapak Siregar, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for hosting today. I feel kind of, so I guess, singled out as being kind of across different industries. You know, where I'm a producer. I'm in the entertainment industry. Yes, I did co-produce Crazy Rich Asians and a number of other films, some good, some bad, but a lot of them made in this region, and particularly a lot made in Indonesia. And why Batam? Well, my father, Chris, started the industry, moved there back in the 70s and 80s when he was in the oil and gas industry and was looking for cost-effective and strategic locations for fabrications. It was close to Singapore, Malaysia, there were ports available, and there was a lot of land. And so all throughout the years, we were developing part of that ecosystem to kind of make that a more livable, work, live and play island. I came into the media business after, leaving UK film school. I wanted to make movies, and there was a very sort of like stagnant industry after the crisis. Indonesia was down to making 20 or so movies, and theaters weren't really growing, but there was opportunity. So we went into that business, and we built the country's first animation studio and film studio. And we built that in Batam because we felt that there was a lot more synergies to scale because of the creative talent. Indonesia has a very deep pool of creative talent, from the arts side, and we've seen that across Indonesia through its cultural heritage. And so I thought, how are we able to digitize this heritage into something that the world is enjoying, when we have the likes of Pixar and Disney, and it was all sort of like blossoming at that time. And when I heard it was just so expensive to make these shows, and a lot of studios were growing outside of North America and Canada, and I thought there was an opportunity there. So we built the studios in Batam. We started with the animation studio, and then moved on to build the Indonesia's first film studio as well. And we didn't do that just overnight. It took 10, 15 years. But we did that with a lot of partnerships and collaborations with North American partners, partners in the United States, partners in Canada, United States, particularly for the production, the film production studios. We spent a lot of time in Hollywood, and of course, traveling across the US, bringing expertise, building the sound stages, as well as building the animation pipeline, particularly with Canadian companies, and we brought the sort of like the first, I would say, pioneers of the industry here. What really surprised us of course, Batam was strategic because it was close to Singapore. We were able to kind of set up the studio and set up pipelines there. And, we started with the first animated film and enabled animators who were already somewhere in Singapore to travel across easy to Indonesia, people coming across from different parts of the world to access through Singapore. So it was really quite strategic. And so we built the studio to become sort of like, 350 to 400 artists. We produced 5 to 7 television shows, you know, a year, international television shows that are shown anything from Disney, Netflix, Nickelodeon, even Garfield at one point was produced there. We've won 4 Emmys in our time, and it's not a lot of people know that there's an industry based there. But you know, we quickly realized that, you know, Batam, and not just Batam, but Indonesia has this huge depth of talent, and not just creative, but technical as well. And that's where we thought, my gosh, okay, let's kind of continue this story, not just from the entertainment business and from the animation to the studios, but we also decided that, you know, it should also encapsulate the digital growth that Indonesia was kind of getting into in the last couple of years. And so while we were growing our business in Batam, and because it was very accessible to global markets, but also there was a chance for global markets to, you know, for the whole of Indonesia to actually come to Batam, as opposed to someone being able to travel to the whole of Indonesia. So Batam became a really our digital showcase. But over the years, why Batam as well is because it is a digital bridge, literally. I mean, we have a number of fiber optic. We have 6 landing stations, 7 submarine cable systems, 13 dedicated cables connecting Nongsa to Nongsa Digital Park to other parts of Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, and the US West Coast. So it's really become this digital bridge. So we built a digital park that's got around 100 companies. We have about 1,000 people who are working there, you know, small, medium enterprises or the MSMEs. And so we're encouraging, there's an incubator program there as well. And we also have the Apple Academy that's there. Now, there's 3 locations. The Apple Academy is based in Indonesia, and we're one of them. There's also, you know, 3 countries only in the world that also host the Apple Academy. And so we're on our 2nd cohort, and every cohort every year has about 100 students from all over Indonesia who are trained in the latest iOS apps development. And that's really great because we're training the next generation of talent that really didn't have that much opportunity to look into this this next generation of digital commercialization. So that's really why we chose to Batam. But it was also we had aspirations to go in. Sorry.
If you don't mind, Mike, well, first of all, I just wanted to say that I've actually seen your plans for Nongsa. I mean, they really are extremely impressive. But if you don't mind, can we move on to another topic that we really do also want to cover, not just the fantastic expansion of digital commerce in Indonesia, but also the whole issue of environmental sustainability and climate change. So I just wanted to turn, if I could, to Mr. Dakri Purchase. Dakri, you're the CEO of UPC Renewables, a company that invested in Indonesia's first wind farm project in Sidrap, South Sulawesi in 2018. And by all accounts, the project was on time and within budget and has been performing above expectations, which is terrific to hear. So now it looks as if Indonesia has very ambitious targets for sourcing its energy from renewables. And the question to you is this: I mean, it obviously gives your company enormous potential scope to expand operations. So what is your strategy going forward with respect to renewables? And what advice would you have to other foreign investors wishing to enter into this sector? Dakri?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks very much. Well, I guess the first thing is to pass on significant thanks to Ibu Sri and Bapak Mahendra, both of which UPC knows pretty well. And I think the good news is that what they told us this evening is absolutely the truth and nothing but the truth. So they have been doing a pretty good job of recognizing what success needs to look like in Indonesia. They've recognized what the issues are. I mean, we've heard, I think most of us on the call know about the complexity of legislation and conflicting regulations and confusion amongst perhaps different layers of those who administer the various permitting processes or land processes or whatever it happens to be. But as I say, positive from that is that the guys have grasped it and are busy trying to deal with the various elements of it. And we're obviously seeing that happening from significant lobbying from lots of different entities. Obviously UPC Renewables is an American originated business, so we have a pretty close relationship with the US Embassy and their associated team. And the political change that's taking place or has taken place in the States is already having implications positively on renewables throughout the world, but not least in Indonesia. Of course, Indonesia is heavily dominated by the benefit that it has of significant natural resources, not least batu bara, the coal industry, and that, of course, is an industry that is a direct competitor of renewables, and renewables needs to find its space amongst that sort of big brother, if we call it that. But as we know, in the rest of the world, certainly, when I left the UK, actually I'm a coal guy by origin, but when I left the coal industry, it was sort of not doing too well. And a number of years later, of course, it's closed down and it's gone completely renewables. And why? Of course, because everybody now recognizes the value cost of carbon. So the UPC entity brings with it the opportunity to try and push forward what we call within our business low cost renewables, not just renewables for renewables' sake. It has to be commercial. It has to offer people like PLN, our customer, it has to offer them betterment in terms of whether it's grid stability, whether it's managing frequency control through the use of batteries, whether it's through just general improvements to the infrastructure by way of having improved substations and so on and so forth. That allows us to try our very best to bring them a lower, what they call BPP price, which is basically an average cost of electricity hitting the grid system. And our number one objective is to make sure that the proposals that we bring forward bring the most advanced technology, because as we know, in the renewables game, the cost curve is exponential downwards, where even the project that we've built in Sidrap very successfully, as you quite correctly stated, Vikram, it's already a smaller turbine than perhaps we would use on other projects, and has shorter blades than we would perhaps use on other projects. But we can also bring the fact that the towers that we use, the steel towers that we use, are a local product. We bought those towers off a business through in West Java, and it was the first time that a product was manufactured in West Java and transported not too far away in Indonesian terms, and used up in Sulawesi. And of course, we have other projects for which we would like to continue to use those homegrown products.
So Dagri, one thing which is very important in the sorts of investments that your company makes is that they're long-term investments, they're huge capital investments.
Yeah.
And the question that's come up from the audience, from Manish Kasliwal from Singapore, and the question is, and it's particularly relevant to somebody like you, how stable and predictable are these policy changes, and what assurance have people like you sort of received as to the stability of the policies that your long-term investments so depend on? How would you very quickly respond to that? Because we're now getting questions thick and fast from the audience. So go ahead.
Okay, that's a highly relevant question. I mean, to be honest, the key document out of everything that we sign is, of course, a power purchase agreement. And whether or not that power purchase agreement can survive all sorts of policy changes or changes in attitude, or people that perhaps decide they don't like renewables for a particular period of time, And as long as a power purchase agreement can remain intact, then that brings confidence to the investment community. And I have to say it that, you know, even probably the most important KPI in the renewables industry going forward for Indonesia is the quality and volume or number of PPAs that are now signed as we head towards these 23% targets, etc. Because
Indeed, I'm so fully aware of these PPAs because I was deeply involved in their renegotiation during the crisis in 1998.
of course, yeah,
Which tells you how old I am.
yeah.
Alex, you know, there's a question that has come up on a topic that you and I were in fact talking about just yesterday. George Gonzalez is asking the question, well, what about judicial reforms? And, you know, isn't this an issue, especially for things like contract enforcement and so forth? So what are your views as to the current status or state of the rule of law in Indonesia, how it impacts foreign investors?
That's a tough question, Vikram, as you know, and it goes to the purchase power agreements and everything else. Certainly the ability to resolve disputes that inevitably come up in business is important. And you know, President SBY ran on a platform on a second term on addressing the judicial mafia in Indonesia, in English terms, and that challenge is still out there. It's one of the few things that the omnibus law on job creation did not do as good of a job as I had hoped. It's a hard thing because, as in the United States, there is a separation between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judiciary. And so it's a little more complicated to address the challenges of the judiciary. But it is a major challenge for business, and wherever possible, arbitration is preferred by our member companies rather than taking it into the Indonesian court system, which can be a labyrinth and can take years to get a resolution. And sometimes that resolution is not as clear and cut along the legalities as we would like them to be. So it's a great question. It is still a challenge. But there are ways around it, especially through arbitration and in Indonesia and even in international centers like Singapore.
Thanks. Sarah, I mean, can you perhaps speak to that point as well about judicial issues and how they might impact Canadian investments in Indonesia? But while you're talking about that, if you could very briefly give us your assessment about something that we haven't yet touched on, which is the Indonesia Investment Authority, or INA, as Ibu Sri Mulyani mentioned in her talk, in her remarks. So 2 quick points from you, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Sure. And look, everybody said it already. Stability and predictability. That's what business wants. That's what business needs to operate. They need to know that they're going to be treated fairly and that they will have a clear and understandable recourse if things happen. So that, you know, that's what business wants. When we talk about the Indonesian Investment Authority, I think this is a really innovative and creative tool. I actually think, if I understand the minister correctly, and what I gather from how it's going to be rolled out, or how it's working, it's looking to attract foreign and commercial investments in support of national sustainable development priorities, but it's crowding in, right? And I think that's really neat. And I think that there are a lot of Canadian investors who are interested in this, including Caisse de dépôt, which is it was, you know, quite seriously there and looking at those opportunities in Indonesia. But you know, when we talk about stability and predictability, and when we talk about the INA, I think the one thing people want to be sure of is that it preserves its independence, and that investment decisions get made on a strictly commercial basis, that there's as little sort of political influences as possible, and people are going to be watching for that. It's only a few months old. What I hear today is that it's, you know, it's looking well positioned to address those kinds of preoccupations, but it, you know, it's on the right track, but let's make sure it stays on that track, and that'll make it very, very attractive for Canadian and other investors.
Thank you. Dakri, we've got a question from the audience from Wayne Forrest, whom you probably know. He said, can you comment on PLN's announcements to get off coal? And is Indonesia's coal industry pushing back?
Wow. Yeah, it's a fair distance to go to wean off coal, because it's, you know, it has a heavy position, you know, 70% plus on the grid, and yes, there's still in the current RUPTL, the forward plan, there's still a fairly significant amount of coal proposed. So it's not an easy fix. And to be honest, the renewables business sector has to step up to the mark and offer a value proposition. And, you know, the government will, I think, fairly soon, particularly with COP26 and G22 literally round the corner, you know, standing on a platform with a heavy coal position, it's a pretty untenable position to have long term without a plan. And as long as there's a plan for how renewables can come to the fore and contribute its part, then of course we see what I've seen in my lifetime, which is not that long a lifetime, Vikram, and that is that the coal industry basically went from boom to closed in about 17 years in the UK, because I was part of it, yeah, recognized it whilst it was happening. And various tools were eventually used, like carbon bubble. So you could have a certain amount of carbon that you were allowed to produce, and beyond that you had to buy your penalty mechanism. Well, of course, Indonesia hasn't got to that stage yet, but of course it will, because that's the language of the modern world in terms of how carbon is valued and how it has an impact, and how the antithesis of that being renewables can perform.
Yeah, thanks, Dakri. I mean, I agree with you. Weaning a country off coal, country like Indonesia, but in India, China have the same predicament. Weaning them off coal is a very complex task, including the whole issue of how do you deal with stranded assets. Mike, I'm very conscious of the fact that we haven't really talked so much about the whole sort of explosion in the number of unicorns, and we've heard mention of a decacorn. So how do you explain this? And, you know, just yesterday, or a few days ago rather, John Riady mentioned that the digital sector will grow to $300 billion in the next 3 years, which sounds absolutely phenomenal growth. What explains this? And if you could very quickly, because we are running out of time now, but if you could very quickly give us your assessment of this sector and what possibilities you see and what possibilities American and North American investors have.
Sure, Vikram. I think a lot of people don't really realize what's happening in Indonesia, you know, in terms of digitization. I mean, on a facts basis, you know, we're 268 million people globally. We're the 4th largest internet user of around, like, with 185 million people using it. They're made up mostly of millennials, Generation Z consumers, digital natives. I mean, they're all driving the digital economy. Indonesian consumers are avid internet users. Now, there's approximately 58% of those users are spending between 2 to 8 hours, and nearly 20% spend 8 hours or more on a daily basis on the internet. Now, the e-commerce market has boomed because, I mean, it is the largest in Southeast Asia, accounting for 50% of the region's total market price, market size. And it has the highest adoption rate of e-commerce. Now, in 2019, Indonesia's digital economy contributed to about 2.9% of the GDP. It's not the highest compared to countries like Singapore and Vietnam, but is rising. Now, Indonesia is becoming increasingly dynamic with its innovative and technology startup sector. It's quite hot for investments, and it's really attracted a lot of global tech giants. Venture capitalists, as you know, one of the largest is Tokopedia, for example, who has an estimated valuation around 7.5 billion. And now Gojek, which is the early powerhouse, you know, now the decacorn because of its 10 billion valuation. Now that's set to merge with Tokopedia called Go2, and that valuation is going to be 18 billion USD. Now that's the largest merger in Indonesia to date. And there are hundreds of more established enterprises gaining traction. Thousands of early startups along the way. Now, what the pandemic did was to force a change in lifestyle and to use e-commerce, driving the value of e-commerce. And it's forced hundreds and thousands of traditional micro, small, medium enterprises to go online and survive, pushing the innovation and becoming more resilient. And so really that's what's driving the push on the e-commerce side. And I'm trying to make it as compact as possible to answer.
Right. So lots of exciting things happening around a range of areas. So to summarize and crystallize the messages that you wish to convey to our audience, right? I'm going to put a challenge to all of you. Give me 3 words that you think just crystallize the messages you want to convey. Alex?
Well, thank you, Vikram. I think dynamic, significant, and promising are the 3 words I would use.
Thank you. Sarah?
I had significant as well. Also changing and exciting.
Thank you. Mike?
It's innovative, passionate, and massive. That's fine.
Zachary, last but not least, your 3 words.
I had tenacious. It's team's vital, and a P for patience, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That summarizes well, I think, the messages that we've just had in our discussion. Look, I would like to thank you, the panelists, for your valuable expertise and for the time that you've given to this exercise. And I want to thank the audience in particular for tuning into this discussion. So let me now hand the microphone back to you, Sumit. Over to you.
Thank you, Vikram. A big thank you to you and to the panelists for a brilliant and compelling discussion, and what a great way to end. I now pass this over to our affable and distinguished host, Pa Noora Swajaya, Director General of America and Europe, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for his closing remarks. Pa Noora has held several important roles in his career, including being the Indonesian ambassador to Singapore, the Indonesian ambassador to ASEAN, and head of the Economic Diplomacy Task Force, amongst many others. Pa Noora is from the mystical island of Bali, and I keep hoping for the day he will invite me to spend the weekend in his beautiful home. Pa Noora, no pressure, and over to you for your closing remarks. Terima kasih, Pa.
Thank you, Pak Sumit. I don't know, whenever I'm speaking, my video is not on. So this is also what is happening in the last webinar. But Excellencies, distinguished panelists, government representative, companies executive, especially the panelists and all of the participants here, ladies and gentlemen. After such a stimulating conversation that we have over the past 90 minutes, what happened? So I think we are now arriving at the end of the second series of the Indonesia is open for business. I hope the conversation is not only stimulating, but also enlighten the participants on the investment opportunities from creative, digital, renewable, low carbon, as well as other potential industries, which is supported by macroeconomic stability. We have heard about stability many times in the conversation, as well as the vibrant democracy, continuing reform-minded attitude, as well as improved business-friendly environment. As a market of more than 270 million people and part of more than 650 million regional market of ASEAN, with a growing middle income and digitally connected population, including also the potential of more than 2.2 billion population, which is 30% of the world's population, and also 30% of the global GDP within the context of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or RCEP, that was signed last year, Indonesia is certainly is the central gravity of the region as well as the Asia's economic powerhouse. A resilient Indonesia, supported by sustained political stability, vast natural resources, and skilled human resources, is situated well in the world's fastest growing economies at the center of the Asian century. Supported by dynamic and vibrant young demography, as what we heard from the conversation, embracing digitalization with a growing number of innovative startups and tech unicorns, Indonesia is also in the middle of continued growth on digital innovation and industry transformation, including also Industry 4.0, and this is also very important, low carbon economy and low carbon development. Rigorous infrastructure development supported by the newly launched Indonesia Sovereign Wealth Fund or Indonesia Investment Authority represent a continued strong commitment to attract investment to Indonesia. In the Asian century, despite the impacts of the pandemic, many remain very optimistic about the potential of our region and also the potential of Indonesia. The prediction is also aligning with such optimism. After the implementation of the Omnibus Law on Job Creation and more than, I believe, 51 implementing regulations, we have seen a growing confidence on Indonesia's continuous reform, and it has also been positively responded by a plan by many investors to invest in Indonesia. We are aware of the possible hiccups in the implementation of the field, but let me assure you, as also what Vice Minister Mahendra mentioned earlier, that such issue will certainly be robustly addressed. In addition to the RCEP, we just concluded the ratification of the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Free Trade Area. Hopefully, we will be able also to complete Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with the EU, and certainly, hopefully, to start with Canada, as expected by Ibu Sarah, with Mercosur, as well as with the European Economic Union. Let me thank many participants, many businesses, including the small and medium sizes, for your confidence in Indonesia and for continued commitment to expand your business in the country. Before concluding, allow me to also extend my sincere gratitude to all of you, all of the participants, for making your time available to participate and also join us in this conversation. To conclude, this is a vote of thanks. Let me thank Minister Sri Mulyani, Vice Minister Mahendra Siregar, and all of the distinguished panelists, the moderator, including also all of our team from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, ASEAN Business Partner, and also special thanks goes to all of our heads of missions in North America, Canada, US, and Mexico, and also to our friends, AmCham Indonesia, Pak Lin Newman, American Indonesian Chamber of Commerce, Pak Wayne Forrest, Canadian Trade Commissioner, Ibu Sarah Wilsall, US Asia Business Council, Pak Alex Feldman, US Chamber of Commerce, Pak John Goyer, but last but not least, of course, our friend Pak Vikram, Pak Mike, as well as Pak Dekri. Let me kindly remind all of you to address any further questions pertaining to your inquiries, your investment plan to Indonesia. Please address all of those questions through the email that has already been shown on the screen. We will make sure that all of your inquiry will be responded in a very quick manner. We also would like to thank you for participating in a small survey by clicking in the polls button in your screen so as to provide us with good input to ensure a more effective and a better quality of events in our next sessions. So it is my hope that our conversation today be as valuable for you as also for all of us. We will keep you informed and updated on the following follow-up sessions throughout this year that will focus on particular sectors of priorities for foreign direct investment in Indonesia. Indonesia and all of us here are looking forward for your continued support in promoting investment and trade relationship with Indonesia and also with all of your respective countries. I wish you all a pleasant day and look forward to seeing you again, particularly as investors to Indonesia. Thank you very much. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.